Welcome back to Campfire Horror Tales. Tonight, I'm sharing 6 true Christmas visitor horror stories. Real encounters people claim happened in the quiet, chilling weeks before the holidays. These aren't cheerful festive tales. These are the kind of stories you shouldn't hear at night, especially when winter shadows grow longer and something watches from the cold. So sit back, settle in, and let's begin. I grew up on a quiet street in rural Pennsylvania, the kind of place where November feels heavy, like the whole world is holding its breath before winter arrives. Our only real tradition was the light tunnel. Every house on the street hung long strings of Christmas lights from porch to porch, stretching across the road like glowing ribs. When all of them were lit, the whole street felt warmer, safer, almost alive. But last year something walked beneath those lights. And I still don't understand what I saw. We put up the lights the Saturday after Thanksgiving. The air smelled like cold earth and wet leaves, and you could feel that emotional dip people get when fall starts slipping away. I helped my dad untangle extension cords while he complained about early darkness. The street looked nice when we finished, bright arches of color disappearing into the distance. That night, just after 11, I stepped outside to take the trash out. The lights hummed softly, a warm buzzing sound that echoed off the bare trees. I remember feeling oddly calm, until one of the arches flickered. Not the whole strand, just the exact middle, like something tall had passed under it. I froze, trying to make sense of it. There was no wind, no traffic, no animals running around, just dead stillness and that weird, perfect flicker, like the lights reacted to height. I told myself it was just a loose connection. But when I walked back inside, I kept thinking about the space under the arch, how a normal person would barely reach its lowest point. But the flicker came from the highest section. The next night, around the same time, 2 arches flickered in a row. It started at the far end of the street and moved toward my house, light after light dipping for half a second, then returning. I counted the pauses between them. Each one was the same, a slow, heavy rhythm, not fast like someone running, not casual like someone walking, more like footsteps from something large, calculated, and watching its surroundings. After that, I couldn't sleep. On the 3rd night, it wasn't just flickering. One of the strands went completely dark. I stepped outside and instantly saw it. The sag in the wire. Small, but noticeable, like someone had brushed against it. But the snow below was untouched. The layer was thin, fresh, perfect. No footprints, no drag marks, nothing. Just a clean white sheet and a sagging wire. A chill rolled down my back. I walked slowly toward the darkened arch and felt this pressure in the air, like the quiet wasn't normal quiet, but something holding its breath. I shined my phone flashlight up at the wiring, and that's when I saw it. One of the bulbs wasn't broken. It was melted, not burned out. Melted. A tiny drip of hardened plastic hung from it, like it had been softened by something warm that passed too close. I backed away and kept the porch light on all night. The strangest part is what happened in the following days. My neighbors noticed it too. They talked about lights dimming only when they walked outside. A strange stretching shadow that slid under the arches. A low humming sound that wasn't coming from the bulbs. Someone joked about a 9-foot Christmas spirit doing late-night shopping. But no one really laughed. By the 5th night, the street changed. People stayed inside. Curtains stayed closed. No one walked their dogs after sunset. And the lights reacted more. I remember one moment very clearly. I was watching from my bedroom window when the farthest arch flickered. Then the next one. Then the next. Coming closer. Each dip lasted longer, like whatever was under them had slowed down. When it reached the arch closest to our driveway, the lights didn't just dip. They bent, sinking as if something pressed upward against the underside of the strand. The wire strained. The bulbs stretched down. The whole arch lowered an inch. That's when I finally saw the silhouette. Not clearly, not enough to describe a shape, but enough to know it wasn't human. The shadow was too tall, too narrow, too smooth somehow. It didn't move like a person. It glided, and the lights above it dimmed in a soft wave, rising back only after it passed. I ducked away from the window, heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. For a full minute, I stayed crouched behind my bed, breathing through my hands, listening for footsteps on the porch. But there were none. Only silence. And then, the porch light flickered once. My dad found the next morning's damage before I did. The arch in front of our house had stretched almost 2 inches overnight. The wire was warm to the touch, and in the snow, finally, something left a mark. Not footprints, not tracks. A long, thin groove, like someone dragged a single finger across the snow. Slowly, purposefully, from the end of the street straight to our porch. We never figured out what made it. We never saw the silhouette again. But this year, nobody put up the light tunnel. And I still ask myself, if the lights reacted to it, did they attract it? Or were they the only thing that let us see it passing through? My uncle always said that December brings out 2 kinds of people. The ones who love the holidays, and the ones who feel something darker creeping in with the cold. I never took his words seriously until he told me what happened to him in the winter of 1987. He wasn't the type to exaggerate. He worked long hours at a steel plant, kept to himself, and hated being the center of attention. So when he finally shared this story, he made me promise never to repeat it to anyone in the family. I guess telling strangers on the internet doesn't technically count. Back in 1987, he was living in a small mountain town in Colorado, staying in a rental cabin while he worked a seasonal job. The town had heavy snowfall, tall pines, and a strange tradition he didn't understand. People hung little bundles of sticks, tied with red thread, on their doors. He said they looked like miniature brooms or cages, and some of them had small bells attached. When he asked about them, locals avoided the topic. One old woman finally muttered, "For protection. For the nights he walks." He thought she meant burglars. She didn't. One night, after a long shift, he had to walk home because his truck wouldn't start in the cold. It wasn't a long walk, maybe 15 minutes. But the snow had started falling hard. The wind blew sharp needles of ice into his face, and the trees creaked under the weight of fresh snow. He said the whole forest felt too alive, like the branches leaned toward him when he passed. Halfway home, he noticed something odd. Footprints. But not human footprints. They were too deep and too far apart, spaced like whatever made them was taking long, heavy strides. The prints had a strange shape, too. The front half looked like a split hoof. The back half, like a heel. A hoof and a heel in one footprint. He stared at the trail for way too long. Part of him wanted to follow it. The smarter part of him kept walking toward the cabin. But once he noticed the prints, he couldn't stop seeing them. They were scattered through the trees, crossing the road at strange angles, disappearing into the brush, circling back. Something big had been walking alongside him. He tried to shake off the feeling, but the woods suddenly went quiet. Not the normal winter quiet, a choking, muffled stillness that felt intentional. Even the wind died. He said he could hear his heartbeat in his ears. Then came the bells. Not bright Christmas bells. Not cheerful. These bells were slow, low, like metal being tapped underwater. They rang once, then again, then closer. My uncle turned around, expecting to see a horse or some kind of farm animal. Instead, he saw a shape moving between the trees, tall, almost blending with the pines, darker than the night around it. He couldn't describe the exact details. He said his brain rejected the shape. But he noticed two very clear features: the horns and the fur. Long, coarse fur that looked wet. Horns that curved like a ram's but were far larger. It moved in a way that didn't match its size, too smooth, too quiet, almost gliding. And every time it shifted, the slow bells chimed from somewhere deep inside the fur. My uncle froze. The creature stopped too. They stared at each other across the snowy path. Then it stepped forward. One hoof, one heel, just like the tracks. He wanted to run, but his legs refused. The creature tilted its head as if studying him, and he felt something heavy and cold settle in his chest. A pressure that pushed all warmth out of his body. The only thing he could do was whisper, "What are you?" The creature's answer wasn't a voice. It was breath. Hot, long breath that rolled through the air like steam, melting snowflakes around it. He felt it hit his face even from 20 feet away. And then, so slowly it almost looked graceful, the creature lifted one long arm. Its fingers, too many fingers, curled toward him in a gesture that looked disturbingly like beckoning. "Come closer. Come here." My uncle backed away until he slipped on the icy road. The second he hit the ground, the bells rang again, louder this time, sharper, as if whatever was inside the shadows didn't like sudden movement. He scrambled up and ran harder than he ever had in his life. He didn't look back. Not once. When he reached the cabin, the little bundle of sticks on the door was gone. Torn off, thrown into the snow. He never stayed another night in that town. He quit the job, drove home, and refused to spend Christmas anywhere near the mountains. Years later, when he finally told me the story, I tried to joke and ask if he thought it was Krampus or something out of folklore. He didn't laugh. All he said was, whatever it wasn't punishing anyone. It was searching, and it almost found me. I used to work night security at a mid-sized shopping mall in Ohio. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and December usually meant easy overtime. Most stores closed by 9 p.m., and once the crowds disappeared, the building felt strangely peaceful. Warm air, soft holiday music playing through the speakers, fake snow scattered around the Santa setup in the center court. But last year things changed. And I don't think the man who played Santa ever left the mall when his shift ended. At least, I don't think it was a man at all. My shift started at midnight. The mall was always empty at that hour, except for cleaning staff on the other wing. I'd make my rounds, check the emergency exits, walk past the Santa photo area, and scan for anything out of place. On the first night of December, I was walking past the North Pole setup, the throne, the gift boxes, the lights shaped like candy canes, when I noticed something strange. The Santa figure was sitting on the throne, still in full costume, at midnight, 2 hours after the mall closed. I figured maybe someone forgot to lock up the suit room and the actor was being lazy. I called out, "Mall's closed, buddy. You need to head out." The Santa didn't respond. He didn't move either. Thinking he fell asleep, I walked closer. The red suit looked right. Velvet, white trim, gloves, everything. But the beard was wrong. It wasn't synthetic. It looked too real. The curls were uneven, slightly yellowed at the tips, like aged hair. "Sir?" I repeated. No answer. I stepped onto the platform and reached toward his shoulder. And before I could touch him, his head turned. Slow. Too slow. Like someone learning how to use a neck. I jumped back so fast, I nearly fell off the platform. His face turned toward me. But something was off. The skin around the eyes didn't look like skin. More like wax that had been warmed and cooled too many times. And the eyes themselves, I still don't know how to describe them. Not fully human, not fully plastic. Somewhere in between. Like taxidermy eyes placed in the wrong skull. He stared at me for maybe 5 seconds. Then he smiled. Not a jolly Santa smile. A stretched, heavy grin that pulled too wide, revealing teeth that were far too straight, and far too many. I bolted, didn't even finish my rounds. I just went straight to the security office and locked the door. I stared at the camera feeds for an hour before I convinced myself I imagined it. But on the feed for camera 12, the Santa area, the throne was empty. I didn't see him leave. The next night, I told myself it was exhaustion. Holiday season always messed with schedules. I walked past the Santa setup again around 1 a.m. Everything looked normal. Until the throne turned. Not quickly, not dramatically, just a slight shift. Like something heavy had been sitting on it and changed its weight. The hair on my arms stood straight up. I radioed the cleaning crew, pretending to check if anyone passed through the area. Nobody had. I took a few steps closer and noticed that one of the fake presents beside the throne had been moved. Then another. And another. They formed a trail, a crooked line, leading behind the Santa backdrop into the dark storage entrance. I should have called my supervisor. I should have left it alone. Instead, I followed the boxes. Behind the Santa display was a staff-only area where they stored props. It was dim, with metal racks and plastic bins stacked to the ceiling. My flashlight beam cut through the dark, but the air felt heavy, like something was breathing in the room with me. Then I heard it. A low, wet whisper. Not words, more like sound pushing through a throat that wasn't built right. Ha, ha. Ha-ya. I swung the flashlight to the right. Nothing. To the left. Nothing. Straight ahead. He was standing between the racks. Still in the Santa suit, but taller than before. Much taller. His head almost brushed the top shelf. His arms hung too low, sleeves stretching unnaturally. The beard dripped, actually dripped, like something inside his mouth was soaking it. And those eyes? They reflected the light, like an animal's. He took one slow step toward me. The sound he made wasn't a growl or a breath. It was bells, soft jingle bells, muffled inside his chest, like something metal was rattling deep inside him. I ran. I didn't think. Didn't look back. My footsteps echoed so loudly, I couldn't even hear if he was behind me. I locked myself in the security office again, shaking so badly I dropped my keys. The cameras flicked between feeds, static cutting through every few seconds. When camera 12 finally cleared, the Santa display was back in perfect order. Every present in place, every prop untouched. And the throne was empty again. I quit 2 days later. Officially, I told them it was health reasons. Unofficially, I don't want to know what was wearing that suit or why it only appeared after the mall closed. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm trying to sleep, I swear I hear that same muffled jingle. Not outside, not in my house, inside my head. Like whatever it was never went back to wherever it came from. Like it found me even after I left. My father grew up in a small town in northern Vermont, the kind of place that feels older than the rest of America, older even than the forests around it. He never talked much about his childhood. But there was one story he repeated every December. Not as a warning, not as folklore, but as something that had genuinely scarred him. He called it the rule of the 12 nights. According to him, every year from December 13th to December 24th, the entire town changed. People boarded up windows, added thick curtains, and hung old brass bells on their doors. After sunset, nobody walked outside. Nobody answered knocks. Nobody opened the door, no matter who they heard calling. It wasn't superstition, my father said. It was survival. I always thought he exaggerated until he told me what happened to his friend Michael in 1979. The one year someone broke the rule. Back then, when my dad was 13, kids didn't fully understand what adults were protecting them from. They just knew that something walked the streets at night during those 12 days. Something that wasn't supposed to be seen. It started with the knocking. Not loud pounding, not frantic. Just a single knock, always at midnight. Always gentle, like someone politely asking to be let in. My dad said the knocking happened at every house, every night, right as the clock hit 12. You could hear it drifting down the street in order, one door, then another, then another. Like it was moving from house to house, checking who might be awake. And nobody ever answered. But kids are kids, and Michael was the type who hated following rules. On the 4th night, he told my father he wanted to sneak out and see who, or what, was knocking. My dad begged him not to. He swore the air itself felt wrong after sunset. Like the dark pressed against the house harder than usual. Michael didn't care. That night, he told his parents he was going to bed early. Instead, he slipped out through the back and crouched behind his porch steps, waiting. He had on a thick coat, a flashlight, and this part always stuck with me. A small hammer, as if a hammer could do anything against whatever walked during those nights. My dad found out what happened next by listening through the window. Right at midnight, the first knock came. Far down the road, soft, measured. Michael later said it didn't sound like a hand. It sounded jointed, like something with too many knuckles. The knocks came closer, house by house. A slow, steady rhythm. My dad pressed his ear to the glass. Michael, hidden outside, waited. Finally, the knocking reached Michael's house. He told my father that the figure standing at the door wasn't human. He couldn't see much, just its outline. But it was tall, too tall. Its head nearly brushed the top of the doorway. It didn't move like a person either. It swayed like its limbs didn't entirely belong to it. And its hand, the one that knocked, wasn't a hand, more like a slender limb ending in 3 long, curved shapes. Michael held his breath. The thing tilted its head. Then it whispered. My father said the whisper wasn't in English. It wasn't in any language he recognized. It was soft, like breath being pulled backward into a throat. The whisper came from deep, deep inside it, like something buried in its chest was speaking. Michael panicked. He dropped the hammer. The creature stopped whispering. Then it turned, not by moving its feet. My father said Michael swore the legs never shifted. It rotated silently, like its upper body twisted on its own. And it faced the yard. It faced Michael. My dad's heart hammered as he listened. He didn't dare look outside. He just heard Michael start to breathe too loudly, too shakily. And then the creature stepped off the porch. One long stride. Two. The bells on Michael's door frame jingled once, a faint metallic warning. And the thing froze. It didn't chase him. It didn't roar. It didn't move again. It simply backed away, not turned, not walked. It slid backward into the dark, melting into the night. Michael sprinted inside and locked the door. He didn't sleep for days. The next morning, grown men walked the street in silence. They checked windows, tested the bells, reinforced doors. One of them found prints in the snow outside Michael's porch. Long, narrow impressions, spaced far apart. No toes, no heels. Just smooth, deep shapes that didn't match any animal. My father said that was the last time Michael tried to break the rule. He grew quiet after that winter, almost withdrawn. He moved away right after high school and never came back for the holidays. When I asked my dad what he thought the thing was, he didn't answer at first. He just stared past me, like he was remembering the sound of the knocking. Finally, he said, "It wasn't trying to get inside. It was checking. Every night it was checking who was foolish enough to open the door." He looked at me hard before adding, "And something tells me that one year, someone eventually will." I never cared much about holiday traditions, but my sister insisted we buy an elf on the shelf for my daughter last December. "Kids love it," she said. "It makes the season magical." I didn't understand the hype, but I agreed to try it. My daughter was excited. My wife was happy. And honestly, the little plastic elf seemed harmless. But the one we brought home wasn't the one we thought we bought. We picked it up at a garage sale near our neighborhood. The woman selling it was older, quiet, and kept most of her things in unmarked boxes. When my daughter found the elf, she asked the woman if she could have it. The old lady hesitated. Actually hesitated. Before nodding, she wrapped it in brown paper and said, "Just don't let it sleep in a room by itself." I laughed because I thought she was joking. She didn't laugh at all. We set the elf on the mantel that night. My daughter named him Sprinkles and talked to him for a good 10 minutes before bed. Everything seemed normal, just a cute holiday moment. Around midnight, though, I walked through the living room to get water, and I swear the elf's head was tilted toward the hallway. I convinced myself I was imagining it. Maybe my daughter moved it earlier. Maybe my wife adjusted it. But the next morning, The elf was sitting on the kitchen counter. Not just moved, posed. Its legs were crossed. Its hands were folded neatly on its lap. And it was facing the bedroom hallway again. My wife swore she didn't touch it. My daughter hadn't even been awake long enough to go in the kitchen. But I tried to play it off, telling them I probably moved it subconsciously. The truth was, I knew I didn't. That night, I decided to test it. When everyone went to sleep, I placed the elf in the middle of the dining table. No props, no excuses, just empty space around it. Then I took a picture on my phone, turned off the lights, and went upstairs. At 2:14 a.m., I heard something small hit the floor downstairs. Not loud, but loud enough. I grabbed my flashlight and walked slowly down the stairs. The dining room was dark, except for a faint reflection from the window. Everything looked untouched. Chairs, table, decorations. Quiet. I turned on the light. The elf wasn't on the table. It was standing, actually standing, on the floor by the bottom stair, leaning forward slightly, tilted, as if listening. The picture I had taken was still open on my phone upstairs. I hadn't touched anything. I forced myself to pick it up. It felt heavier than it should have, and warm. Not warm from being near a vent, warm like it had been held or squeezed or alive. I put it in a drawer and slammed it shut. The following morning, my daughter cried because she couldn't find Sprinkles. Against my better judgment, I let her take him back out. But that day, I kept noticing little things. The elf closer to her backpack, then closer to the hallway, then finally sitting on the edge of her bedroom doorway as if watching her play. My wife said I was being paranoid. That night, I didn't sleep well. I woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of soft tapping. Not knocking. Tapping. Like tiny fingers hitting wood, slow and steady. I followed the noise to my daughter's room, heart pounding. The tapping came from inside her closet. I opened the door. The elf was sitting on the top shelf, legs dangling, tapping the wall with one hand. Its head snapped upright when it saw me, not turned, not tilted, but snapped, like a toy jerking on a wire. I grabbed it and threw it in the garage. The next morning, it was back in the living room, just sitting there, in the exact center of the rug, facing the stairs again. I asked my daughter if she brought it inside. She shook her head. I asked my wife. She looked concerned now, not skeptical. We decided to get rid of it. We took the elf to a donation center that afternoon, dropped it off, drove home. My daughter was upset, but relieved too. Like part of her had been afraid to admit something felt wrong. That night, the house felt peaceful again. Quiet, normal. Until 12:47 a.m. A soft thud downstairs. I ran. The elf was sitting on the same rug in the same position, but this time its head was facing the front door. I stared at it for a long time, cold panic running through me. My wife whispered, "How did it get back?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. We packed our bags that night and left to stay at my sister's. My daughter thought it was a fun trip. My wife cried in the car. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed us. The next morning, my sister knocked on the guest room door. "You left this on the porch," she said, holding up the elf. Its head was tilted at that same angle. Its arms were bent differently now, and its painted smile looked wider. We left her house within the hour. I don't know where the elf is today. We've moved twice since then. But every December, without fail, around the first snow, I hear that same soft tapping somewhere in the house. Tiny fingers, slow, patient, and I know it's found us again. My neighbor, Mr. Collins, wasn't the type to believe in anything strange. He was a retired firefighter, practical, level-headed, steady. He fixed his own roof every fall, shoveled snow for half the block, and rolled his eyes at every holiday ghost story I ever told him. That's why the night he knocked on my door, pale and shaking, will always stay in my memory. He said something had been walking on his roof. Not squirrels, not raccoons. Something with weight. Something that dragged. I thought maybe he slipped on the ice and scared himself. But he insisted I come over right away. When I stepped into his house, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not normal nighttime silence. It was heavier, like the whole house was holding its breath. Then he showed me the video. His security camera didn't point at the roof itself, but it picked up the sound. A steady, deliberate series of thumps. Not quick like an animal running. Slow, measured, too heavy to be anything small. Every few steps, there was a long scraping noise. Like something sharp was being dragged across shingles. Then a faint jingle, like a bell. Not bright, distant, muffled, metallic. I told him it had to be ice shifting, maybe tree branches. But he shook his head, gripping the armrest like he was afraid to let go. "Branches don't walk," he whispered. Around 2 a.m., the sound stopped, and he went outside with a flashlight. That's when he saw the footprints. He made me swear I wouldn't tell anyone, but I saw them with my own eyes. Long, narrow impressions on the roof, spaced too far apart for a human stride. Each print was shaped almost like a hoof, but not quite. Too elongated, and beside each one ran a thin line pressed into the snow, almost like fingers trailing alongside each step. Hoof prints, and long parallel drag marks. The snow around them wasn't disturbed, meaning nothing climbed up or down. Whatever walked on the roof didn't use the gutters, didn't use the side of the house. It simply appeared there. The next night, it came back. I wasn't at his place when it happened. I heard about it when he called me at 3 a.m., whispering into the phone that it was pacing above him again. I told him to stay calm, to stay inside, to ignore it. But he said the footsteps were slowing down, stopping directly above his bedroom. Then he said something that made my skin crawl. "It's listening," he whispered. "It knows exactly where I am." I heard the scratching through the phone, long, deliberate drags across the shingles. Not trying to get inside, just tracing the shape of the house, like it was memorizing the structure. He begged me to come over. Against every instinct I had, I drove to his house and parked one street away. I didn't want whatever was on his roof to hear my car. When I stepped into his yard, everything looked normal, except for the snow. The prints were back, and this time, there were more of them, circling the roof like the thing had been pacing the perimeter. Then I saw movement. A shadow moved across the peak of the roof. Not fast, not human. Something tall and thin, too thin to support itself, drifting almost weightlessly. I couldn't make out its face, but I saw limbs, long limbs, that bent wrong, like joints placed at uneven intervals. The bells jingled again, but only slightly, like whatever wore them was trying not to make noise. I ducked inside. Mr. Collins was in the hallway, gripping a baseball bat, shaking so badly he could barely stand. The sound above us grew slower, heavier, like the creature was aware we were both in the same place now. Then the scratching stopped. Total silence. We waited. Minutes passed. Then the footsteps started again, moving toward the far side of the roof, toward the backyard, growing fainter, then disappearing entirely. After the sun came up, we went outside to inspect the snow. The prints went all the way to the edge of the roof, but they didn't go down the side. They went off the roof, as if the creature stepped into the air and kept walking. We followed the trail, hearts pounding, expecting it to vanish a few feet from the house. But it continued across the snow. Impossible, weightless, barely compressing the surface. Long strides, a thin drag line. And then, halfway across the yard, the track stopped, just ended, as if the creature stepped into the sky and disappeared. Mr. Collins stopped sleeping after that. He kept all his lights on at night. He stopped going onto the roof altogether. And every December, he swore the same sound returned. Faint thumps, slow drags, tiny bell. Moving across his house in the weeks before Christmas, he passed away last spring. Heart failure. When his family asked me to help clean the house, I agreed. But I didn't expect what I found in his bedroom closet. A box full of journals, every entry dated during December. And in every entry, he wrote the same sentence. It never left the roof.